It's Tuesday, and this is Trekland HQ. Yes, version 2 for those keeping score at home. And we are live today with author of Inspired Enterprise, Glen Swanson. Yes, today on Trekland Tuesdays Live, number 309, 409. It's all a blur, gang, but you know what? We're back here for another Tuesday of, right from the heart of Portal, coming at you here for some more sanity, clarity, and a bigger picture in all things Star Trek with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemechek. Thank you so much for joining us again. It's also your home, if you're vacation bound, coming out SoCal way for a Trekland Trek. Have you ever thought about having your own customized away mission, a full 6-hour day tour with a quick lunch, but concierge and co-planned by myself, Dr. Trek. It'll be a great day, a unique experience you'll never forget. All right, thanks everybody for being back on a Tuesday. Welcome everybody. We've got a guest waiting in the wings. I can't wait to get to that, but let me just say first off, remember, hey, if you're joining us for the first time, normally or often Trekland Tuesdays Live is my thoughts on a soapbox, and then we dive into the chat because we have a great Trekland Tuesdays Live community. The TTLers are great. So we're going to bring our guest out pretty quickly here, but still introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from. If you are new to Trekland Tuesdays Live, or just let us know how's the weather, how's the trek in your neck of the woods. I'm at this time of day, especially so we can have folks from around the world. And we have a lot of Europeans in with us, occasionally from other continents too. I've had some folks from Brazil before. We've had folks from Africa even a couple of times. I think it was Chad, maybe, or yeah. And we've had some folks from India on with us. So, and of course, the Aussies are here often. Be glad to have you with us. I'm so excited to have our guest today. We will do all the things normal. We'll have the chat going. If you feel like jumping in, please do. Also know, though, that if you're on Facebook, you're only going to see the Facebook comments and questions. If you are on YouTube or Twitch, you'll see all the comments and questions. And I especially love YouTube because that helps our mnemonics here, that helps our metrics. And we have Super Chat. So if you want to throw some silver my way, you know I don't monetize this except for the Patreons. So in the moment here, if you feel like throwing in, because Glen's going to be such a good guest, please do that. Please do that. And having said that, let's bring in Glen Swanson. If you're a long time, if that means 2 years, Glen was on with me a few years ago when he started the Kickstarter for this book and also talked about some of the research he'd done. We'll get into that, but it's covering a wide swath, but it all makes sense when you talk about Star Trek and the impact it's had in various ways. And he's tracked the history of the AMT model and the AMT company, which had its roots as aerospace even. A lot of people don't realize that. Well, let's stop talking. Let's bring him in now. Glen, I'm so glad to have you. Glad you could join us. And boom. Oh, and you know what I forgot? I was going to say congratulations on the book, but I did mean to do this. And now I'm going to, so I cheated. Folks, if you order, this is how it comes, right?
You order it from me.
Yes, you're ordering it from Glen. So you order this, and he asked me, did he package the book? So I'm doing a quickie opening. So mine came with cardboard, right? And then still the book is shrink wrapped, and so now I'm going to do a quickie here. We'll do a book opening. Now I've read a lot of it on the PDF, so I'm not missing out. But boom, there we go. Inspired Enterprise. And if you don't know, that's the very famous picture of Dee and Jimmy and Gene all visiting. This is Dryden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. In 1967, they headed out to Dryden at their invitation to tour the flight research facility out there at Air Force Base.
So congratulations on this. And look, and guys, Glen has a long and varied career with books, with publishing. He was the historian at Houston, NASA. I'm saying this, I should be like showing you. There's tons of pictures, tons of text, and tons of Oh, this is the life in the, oh, look at this. It's the life in the universe, the first Smithsonian Leia, because that is the name of the book officially, How NASA, the Smithsonian, and the aerospace community helped launch Star Trek. So, Glenn, I know we talked about this when you had the Kickstarter, but tell everybody new here what, where life led you to do this book.
Well, I started actually back in 1998 when I first worked for NASA at the Johnson Space Center as their chief historian out there. I started to come across documents pertaining to Star Trek. And of course, I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan. I grew up, I'm a syndicated kid. I wasn't quite old enough to watch it when it was originally.
You're a rerun baby like me.
Yes, yes. But I picked it up in syndication and haven't been able to get rid of it since then. It's part of my DNA, as many fans are. So I started to run across documents. And of course, as a historian, documents are my livelihood. And when ones came across my desk that were pertaining to the development, the creation of the original series, correspondence between Gene Roddenberry and various NASA contractors and NASA officials, I said, wow, the only hint that I had of that before was some clues that were given in Stephen Whitfield's book, The Making of Star Trek, our Bible. But I started finding more paths, more signs that there was indeed a collaboration, cooperation, because Gene Roddenberry, after all, was a pilot. He flew B-17s in World War II. He was connected. He was part of the club. He could talk, space or aviation at that time, and then eventually aerospace, and that helped him an awful lot in the series. So that's kind of where it started. And then from there, I just continued to find connections between NASA and the creation of the original television series, and then the Smithsonian as well, because they have the 11-foot model, and all of us, or many of us, or most of us, have seen it at one point time or another. And I was curious about how it got there, who were the movers and shakers, what were the politics involved in that when it did arrive in the 1970s. And so that actually, the Smithsonian's role in Star Trek in helping the series turned out to be much more of a surprise than even the NASA connection that I first started. In fact, the Smithsonian chapter in the book is the largest chapter in the book. And I think readers will really find that very interesting.
Well, I'm showing some photos here because some of these we've seen pieces of. And speaking of NASA, here's Michael Collins when he was director had the meeting here, and this is Durant, who's like. It's interesting because your saga with the documents and letters is kind of reverse of what we have on the Trek files, where we're looking at it from the Roddenberry side. And I'm going to say that the NASA side is probably a lot more cohesive and collected and anal about retaining all that than even the Roddenberry side was, because you've got letters and documents and things. But these photos, folks have seen, especially, hello, come back. People have seen these ones when Dee and Jimmy and Gene were taking that tour at Dryden. But I didn't realize that Herb Schlosser was from NBC was with them. They called him Schloss, and he was one of the network guys with them. So that showed some of the support that NBC gave Star Trek, as long as it, probably more than it would have ever gotten at any one of the other networks, because they had some space nerds, or they had some closet sci-fi people for the 60s there. But
and Herb is in that photograph there.
Yeah.
You don't have the one photo. There's the other photo that I found is a real large photo of the whole group that the production.
Oh, okay. I'm just taking what I saw on Amazon to begin with.
But it's in the book. The other one where you'll see
Bob Justman's here, and Matt Jeffries is in this visit. So this visit is a lot bigger than what we got just seeing Jimmy and Dee and Gene.
Yeah. Joe Pevney was there. And,
yes.
There is excuse me, the other names, but there are two other directors that were there, as well as background individuals that were there. Matt Jeffries was there. He was thrilled. You can just see the expression on his face as he's looking into these actual spacecraft. I mean, because right there in that lower right-hand corner, DeForest Kelley, and then Matt Jeffries is in the foreground there. That's him in the dark suit.
Oh, this is him here.
Yeah, he's to the right there. Looking.
I know he's right here.
Yeah, he's just drooling, at that, because that is X-15 number 1, which, of course, Neil Armstrong flew to the edge of space. And so they're looking actually in a spacecraft. These are ones that reach the Kármán limit and 50 miles or higher into space. And the X-15 did that. And so they're looking at that in 1967. These photos were taken on April.
Yeah. And Bob Justman's wearing his shades. He's trying to look the most Hollywood of anybody, which is kind of funny.
Yep. And then Herb Schlosser is there. He was one of them. He's in the dark suit in the top right there in between the two. He was the one that was head of West Coast operations for NBC, and then eventually moved his way up the chain to become president of NBC. And he helped bring us, Saturday Night Live, among other things. And I actually talked with him on the phone. He was in his 90s.
Oh, wow.
Started corresponding with him, and he was still really, really sharp. And I had even arranged to do an interview with him. And this was just, after we were emerging from COVID. And so I had everything planned. I was going to fly out to New Jersey and visit him at his Manhattan apartment and his wife and everything. And he passed away. I just missed him, but he was really, really, really sharp up to
But you had him on the phone.
I had him on the phone, talked with him, interviewed him. And he was still very, very sharp.
Did you talk to him about the whole Star Trek NBC experience in his part?
because
that's precious. That's great.
I remember a whole lot from that time period, but still, his network background. He's got some actually very good interviews on the television
TV Academy.
TV Academy, that you can get access to. The public can get access to. They can stream them. Those were done earlier, but he's really, really sharp in there, and he talks more about Star Trek than when I, approached him many years later.
Yeah, you read the memos, and they'll say, "Well, Schloss this and Schloss that," or her sometimes.
Yeah.
And that was those those pictures I was noticing. It was it was either March or May '67. I think
it was
May.
April 13th, 1967.
Okay.
In fact,
my point was going to be they had finished the first season, so they had set that up as a PR. They're looking to build the series after the first season.
Yeah, they had time on their hands. That was one of the things. Is like if you show that photograph of the large group that was there, and Mark Daniels was there. Peter, the bald one. He also Greg Peters is there. He's in the background, and then
he was an AD and then the unit production manager.
Yep. Yeah. So
tall guy.
Movers and shakers. They had very, very busy schedules and everything, and that was one of the intriguing things I was curious about. Is how did they, what were the circumstances about them all coming together at this facility? And the timing helped, as you mentioned, because they did have some time on their hands, but still
they were on hiatus.
Yeah, what brought them there all together, especially a lot of these, behind the scenes crew. And so they were given an invitation, they were sent an invitation, and I think in part because of the appearance of Leonard Nimoy that happened just a few months prior to that at the Goddard Symposium, the National Space Club dinner that they had in Washington, D.C., where Leonard Nimoy was present. And at that point is when Gene Roddenberry.
The picture you're talking about.
Yeah, it's that middle one there. Yep, that's the one. Yep, that one. That was a jaw dropper. When I came across that photograph while I was researching the NASA archives, it's like, whoa, you don't see these people all together.
Because these are the ones we've seen. We've seen those.
Exactly.
I've even seen the Martian. I've used this before. Yeah, but this is the rare one. Why is that not out there?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
That one was just just surprised me that you could see so many of those individuals, those key movers and shakers. You just don't see group photos like that, even outside of NASA of them together. So
well, we're geeking out here on the photos, but seriously, I mean, I'm looking at the contents. If you love the model and the design of the Enterprise, this is cool. If you're just a historian. Thank you. I literally just got to open this up and see your inscription. Thank you. Thank you for that. Margaret Weidekamp wrote the foreword, who is the curator now at National Air and Space and is the guiding force that initiated the 50th anniversary restoration of the 11-footer now 10 years ago, which is insane to me. Can't believe this. The Rand Corporation and Harvey Lynn, anybody that listens to the Trek Files, or I should just say anybody who read, like you said, The Making of Star Trek, our Bible, should know all about Harvey P. Lynn and the roots of Star Trek being grounded in science. Kellum DeForest. You have a chapter on Kellum DeForest, who later became Joan Pierce, but in the 60s. I mean, same company, but the backgrounders, and then Stephen Whitfield and AMT, and that we can talk about that. The military and nationalism of Star Trek. Interesting titles here. The aerospace industry in Star Trek, NASA in Star Trek, the Smithsonian, and I love this title, Vindication Through Syndication. That's a great title. But yeah, the I didn't realize, and I was looking at just the illustrations that are at the Amazon site. I knew that it had changed, and I knew the years when the Enterprise was in the ghetto, when it was in the gift shop, and I knew the 92. I forget the guy's model, Bill Myrecki.
Oh, Ed Myrecki.
Yeah, the we were being very cautious. We were being incautious in the 90s and saying the disastrous redo of the Enterprise in the 90s, and people arguing about a lot of factors and how that was not satisfactory. And maybe you've got insight on that, but that renovation for, I guess, the 25th, but just how often, the history of the model. I've had back in the communicator days, had the guy who had it at Golden West, which was a shocker then.
Ron Youngle, yeah.
Those photos, communicator had that in the, I was like, what? And then they were like, well, if you would, that time when one group says, well, if you just want to keep it, it'll save us the freight. I don't know if you have that in your book. Yes. And then they were like, no, wait, cancel that. We want it back.
No,
and then it goes to Smithsonian, and then it has all the different viewings. Yeah.
Yeah, the appearance at Golden West College, because I spent a lot of time there, actually, in their archives, going through newspapers that they had in their collections. One of the things that I found, because Memory Alpha, I think, has an entry for it, and Memory Alpha is a great jumping off point, but sometimes they don't get all the information correct, or they don't have access to all the information. So
sometimes they have the context wrong.
Right. So it's a really good jumping off point. I don't want to discredit them at all, because they do a wonderful job of being kind of the Wikipedia, of course, of Star Trek. But because of that nature, sometimes they don't get everything correct. But one of the things that I was curious about was the appearance at Golden West College, which predated the appearance, of course, of the 11-foot model that finally ended up at the Smithsonian. And it turns out that model appeared at Golden West College not once, but twice.
This is like 72 and 73?
72 and 73, yeah. Where before, the common entry for that is that it appeared only once. But it turns out that no, it appeared in 1972. That was the first Space Expo that was put together. And that was the one where they had Arthur C. Clarke come and speak. And then, they had other individuals as well. And George Pal, it turns out, came and gave a talk out there. It was really cool. If there's any,
and this is Bay Area, right? Northern California.
In Huntington Beach. Yeah, it's right, Huntington Beach. Yeah.
Huntington Beach. That's South LA.
Right. Golden West College is right next to Huntington Beach. So it's that was like 1972. But then it turned out that it came back again in 1973, because that first Space Expo was so successful that he had another one around the same time. I think it was in March or April, around that same time. And that was where Ron Youngle, who I talk about in my book, and you'll see the photographs. If you've seen the photographs of that model, where it's pivoted and angled.
People can just walk by. It's like right there.
Yeah, and actually seeing those photographs, they brought out the 22-inch miniature of the space shuttle. It's in the background, or the shuttlecraft from Star Trek is in there. And then Planet Earth, a miniature from that is in there as well. So there's all these really, really cool things in Ron's photographs. But the other thing that you show in my book is that they brought out the Apollo 16 command module, the actual flown command module for that second Space Expo, which I didn't know about. And they did that intentionally because on the first Space Expo in 1972, they wanted to bring the Apollo 16 crew and the spacecraft and everything to that expo. But they couldn't because they were on their way to the moon, or they were getting ready to go to the moon in 1972. So when the spacecraft successfully landed and everything, they brought the spacecraft to the college there, and it was parked right out in front of their bookshop and student center. And then there was a sample of the moon that was brought back. And so you have Ron's pictures that you see in the book, or you can see them on the web, I guess, as well, where there's, Marines standing guard around the spacecraft and the moon sample. And then, of course, if you go up into the Union building, you will see the 11-foot Enterprise on display. So it was really cool to find that they showed it again. And that second appearance, of course, drew a lot of individuals to it, like the first. And of course, that was in 73. And that was when the Smithsonian requested the model in 73. They got it in 74, in February 74, but they requested it in 73. It took about a year for the model to actually make it to the Smithsonian from the point of request.
So this is, and I said, I know I've seen some of these letters, maybe from Gene's side going out, or maybe receipt, but it's not like Paramount had it. They were trying to, like Golden West, the guy who was putting these together, they basically, it was at that time when Paramount still looked at Star Trek as that thing that cost us money, and thank God we shut it down.
Right.
And then and to be clear, it was like that year or two before all the syndicated local ratings took off. And they realized in their new world of economics for media, that this is not a loss leader, that it could be, a huge winner. But for that year or two, and that's when they offered to sell it to Gene for a little over $500,000. It's kind of crazy. And he couldn't get the cash together, and they were going to just leave the model at Golden West. And then everything changed. Someone woke up. And but it's interesting to hear you say that the Smithsonian requested it, not that it was Paramount trying to unload it somewhere.
No, and that's the wonderful story, I think, that people read in my book in chapter 7, was that Paramount, even at that time, it's like, great, get it off our hands. Because remember, as you mentioned earlier, the organizer of that Space Expo, he was offered the model. You could read about that in Memory Alpha and everything. He said in one of the interviews, he said, yeah, they were offered it to me, take it off their hands, but he didn't have enough room to store it in his garage. And now in retrospect, it's like, oh my gosh, you should have kept it. Because they
find a way. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't think the Star Trek thing would take off, so it's like he had the opportunity to
dead show
at that 11-foot model. But the Smithsonian, fortunately, as history has it, obtained it. And the mover and shaker behind that effort was Fred Durant, which you'll read.
And we've had letters from him back and forth with Gene at times, or Gene writing him about doing more.
Yeah, because there always had to be an advocate. Somebody advocated for this. How did it get started? Who approached Michael Collins with this crazy idea of bringing the Starship, into the halls of the Smithsonian and having it next to, all the
real spaceships.
Yeah, the real spacecraft. What were the motives behind that, and what were the reasons and the rationale? Because this is the Smithsonian, and so it's a really, really interesting story, and I think readers will get a much greater appreciation for why it's there, how it got to be there, back in the 1970s.
And I talk a lot about the pendulum swings there's pendulum swings with everything, whether it's fashion or politics or whatever. And the pendulum swings with Star Trek, if we get people that either they take something for granted when it's going well, or they get depressed when it's not, like, oh, there's 12 years without fresh Star Trek on TV or whatever. The pendulums swing, and the original series is hot. The original series looks old. The original series is retro cool. The original series, no one cares again. And that goes for everything. And it's interesting to me, just in my lifetime as a kid, going, wow, that's so cool that the Enterprise is at the Smithsonian, like of all places in museums. Mm-hmm. It's not in a Hollywood museum. It's at the Smithsonian, and it's at the Air and Space. And that, the 70s was also when the Smithsonian started collecting the MASH, signboard, and Archie and Edith's chair, and the Muppets, and pop culture was a thing they did, but it wasn't even in the pop culture wing. It was at the Air and Space Museum. And then the years when it wasn't front and center, and it was even in storage, and then it took, and I feel like Margaret Weitekamp is like channeling Durant a little bit when she comes up and says, it's the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. It's a part of the inspiration for all of these real ships. The same thing he thought. Mm-hmm. And it's time it got out and got its due. And she's also thinking we'll have tons of good PR and feel good for this. Right. How many million people will come to the Air and Space for
exactly.
For Star Trek? especially.
Oh,
They would come anytime to see Apollo 11 and in Spirit of St. Louis and all that. But they will come if we make a big PR parade about how we're doing and who we got involved from the Star Trek world, and it all worked, and it was wonderful, wonderful. They spun some TV specials, and so anyway. But you chronicle all of that back and forth.
yeah, my book covers basically this time frame of 1966 to 1976. If people want a perspective of how this fits into the overall arch, timeline of Star Trek, that's the type of time period that I cover. Essentially the launch and release of the first season. And then 1976 I closed because that's our bicentennial. That's when the new building opened up, the Air and Space Museum. And that's another thing I want to point out too is when you're talking about politics and everything, there's politics in everything, and the Smithsonian certainly isn't removed from that. But it also helped that they were building a brand new building. Okay, and that's very rare in the Smithsonian end. How many times can you rattle off new buildings? They're quite the thing. And so they were building a brand new Air and Space Museum. So they had this wonderful opportunity to populate it, with new exhibits and things that they weren't replacing something that existed. They didn't have to shove something out off to the side.
They needed new.
Yeah, to put this Life in the Universe exhibit. So they had a concerted effort, an organized effort, and a plan to, populate this new museum with not just things of the past, but also things that motivate and inspire people, visionaries, into the future. And Star Trek certainly represented that, along with, some of the other models that they had from other movies. I mean, Star Trek isn't the only science fiction model that appears, in the Smithsonian. They have other models, miniatures, from Conquest of Space and, Von Braun's series, Chesley Bonestell, things like that. Of course, giant murals by Bob McCall and others. So they're not, but you got this 11-foot model that you can't escape it. I mean, it's really, really big. So it's easy to see, and everyone relates to it. They see it. It's iconic. Yeah. They know exactly what that is.
Well, you remind me about it was the first built, the Air and Space got its own building. It was a huge thing. And it was a bicentennial gift celebration also, when everything was bicentennial. But it reminds me that's also what gave Margaret some leverage, because they opened a new wing.
Right.
And it happened to coincide with the 50th and leveraging all that for the renovation that they did.
Now, exactly. And then the renovation too, to, bring it up from the basement, so to speak, where the model was before, and put it back and restore it and have it in, in front and center and facing Constitution Avenue. There was all these nice opportunities, and the flow of things, it worked naturally to, this was the good time to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I was just looking at the photos and realizing that I'd seen photos over the years, and you had some and I missed out on this because my brother was there in the 80s and sent me some really good photo. Because I was there in 76. I was on a high school trip in the fall of 76, technically. And I was so excited because I'd heard the Enterprise is at the Air and Space Museum. And this was my first trip, period, to go anywhere. And we were in a group. And we went to Williamsburg and New York and Washington. But when we in Washington, Air and Space has got to be one. And I went to the American History Museum, that's the Smithsonian. But I was so excited, and I went to Air and Space, and I saw, the Apollo 11 lunar module, and not the lunar module, saw the command module and the mock-up lunar module, and Spirit of St. Louis, and all the big and could not find the Enterprise. I was so pissed. And then I think that was right when they were either bringing it out still or moving it, or something was going on, but it wasn't on display, and I couldn't believe it. But I think I was reading in your book where I may have caught it when it was in a transition time. But my brother sent me some photos, and then I've got some pictures from 86 of it.
Yeah. So. You were there at the opening of the new building, is what you're saying, or were you there prior to July when they opened the new building?
No, it was after they opened the new building.
Okay. So it was there. Yeah, it was in the Life in the Universe exhibit.
I can't believe I missed it.
Missed it. It was it was hanging up on the first.
Yeah, we've seen the photos. Yeah.
But what a lot of readers don't realize is that the Enterprise, those that recall showing at the Smithsonian, that's something that I had to clarify too, is that was not the first time that it appeared at the Smithsonian, because it appeared at the Arts and Industries building, which was the old Air and Space Museum prior to the construction of the new building. And, that building is still there on the mall. And it appeared there in 1974 when.
So right after they got it up.
Yeah, they got the model in February of 74 after requesting it in 73. And then they were working on this new exhibit called Life in the Universe, and with universe with a question mark. Which was a fantastic exhibit. I mean, it was just during this time when, we had this golden age of robotic exploration. You had the Pioneer 1011 probes with the plaque. You remember the plaque that was on the side? Followed by, the Voyagers with the record.
The record, yep.
Yep, with all this stuff. So, we're sending out these messages in bottles with the idea that, maybe some intelligent life is going to encounter that. How should we, tell them about Earth, so
and this is the 70s when Star Trek is exploding,
right,
and helping get the financing in the even small attitude that lets George Lucas do Star Wars. I mean, we're
right. So the in the midst of all that, they had the first opening of the Life in the Universe exhibit in the old building where it hung up there. So a lot of people, they had a little cardboard card underneath it. It was hanging up there next to a model prototype of the Hubble Space Telescope, and then underneath that were Franz Joseph's blueprints. Were fresh from Equicon in 1973, where they premiered, and he got that license from Paramount to do a limited run. They brought those blueprints out and put them on the wall underneath the model. So people saw that model, in 1973, 74. It gave them time to, experiment with that Life in the Universe exhibit. And then, of course, when they moved to the new building, they used all that data and lessons learned and studies from that first exhibit to help improve the more permanent exhibit that would be created from scratch. That would open up when the new museum opened up in July of 1976.
In the new building. And then, of course, they had the big celebrity open in 79 in December. They had the big
premiere,
the big celebrity charity premiere for the motion picture there, with Robert Wise showing up with the last effects reel to stick into the projector on his lap.
So wet. Right.
Yeah. So we're googing here all about NASA, all about the Smithsonian, but you cover the aerospace industry too, connection and all that, and talk about a little bit about the AMT, because AMT stands for Aluminum Models
Toy
what is
company.
it? Yeah, because AMT was originally like they made miniatures for planes and
yeah,
things.
They started out. I'm from Michigan. I grew up in Grand Rapids. I still live there. I call that my home. And I'm always interested in the history of Michigan as well, especially as it pertains to Star Trek. I mean, that's a bonus, right? If there's some Michigan connection directly to Star Trek. And Aluminum Model Toy Company was founded in Troy, Michigan, which is on the east side of the state, opposite Grand Rapids. And what they originally started doing was producing small models after World War II that were made of aluminum, which is, cars basically that they would sell. And then their big break was they started manufacturing replicas for the big three motor company, in particular Ford. So some of you followers that are into cars as well will recall seeing these little plastic, they eventually became plastic when they did injection molding later on. Of small, highly detailed replicas of cars, because the idea being that if mom and dad come into a dealership and look at a car that they want to potentially buy, they would give them one of these cars, that would be a replica of a Ford Thunderbird or whatever, so that they could take it home, look at it, the kids could play with it, and eventually buy the full size one. So they became a collectible in their own right when those things came out. So AMT grew and became more and more of a leader in injection molding plastic model kits, which really took off after World War II. The technology, which had connections to the aerospace industry as well, took off like crazy. And eventually they heard about this Star Trek show and decided to take a gamble on that. So they you'll read more and more about it. That's the second largest chapter in my book. Chapter 3 is about Stephen Whitfield, AMT, and the making of Star Trek. Focusing a lot on Stephen Whitfield because we read about him in his book. Of course, he's also known as Stephen Poe. That was actually his birth name.
Yeah.
He took Whitfield later as his stepdad. But so many of us didn't even know who he looked like. We read about him, we read his book and everything, and how he got started, his interest in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And same thing with Harvey Lynn, the technical advisor. And I'm always visual. Visual helps me an awful lot to remember things. I can remember things. It's hard for me to remember words sometimes, but it's easy to remember pictures. And so I want to know what these people look like. What did Harvey Lynn look like? What did Stephen Whitfield look like? And so I, went after them and their connections to Star Trek. And Stephen, of course, connected with the model company, because he helped create the first Enterprise model kit, followed by the successful Klingon kit.
Well, he was also the linkage for the deal that AMT got the model rights in exchange for building the Galileo set, the live set, which was basically miniature. I mean, yeah.
Right. He worked for the advertising agency, Patak, in Arizona. And they got a contract with AMT, this advertising agency got a contract with AMT, and he was assigned to that. And so that was how he got started, his interest in Star Trek. He talks about that, of course, in Making of Star Trek. So it's nothing new, but I want to dive in further. I wanted to see more correspondence of him. And I was fortunate to interview his his sister, Bobby, who's still alive in Tulare, California. And she's just a pleasure.
I have to put you up for that, because I'll interrupt you real quick. They brought him, or when everything was booming in the 90s with Trek at the apex and Voyager was about to debut, he got the rights to do, it was kind of a throwback. People were feeling sentimental, and they reached out to him, Pocket did, to do a Making a Voyager book.
Yeah, that's right.
You love everything he did, but he writes his books so they're just like free form of consciousness flow. And there's never an index. And it's just flowing along, and you go back later trying to find something and there's no index. But he did a Voyager making of book and was at the lot, and I got him to autograph a making of book and his new book for me. And he and his wife were there. And and it was brand new. It was like 94 and 95, and we had just been out and everything was booming. And he had cancer, which I didn't realize. And he died like just a year or so after that. And it was, and I never got to sit down and, well, you didn't. I never got to sit down and interview him. He'd done interviews, places, and with the book coming out. And we've got correspondence between he and Gene also at Trek Files. So I'm glad you talked to his sister. Now I want to.
They were very close. Gene
That's
Roddenberry.
Great. That is great.
Gene Roddenberry was actually his best man for his second marriage. There's a really interesting story about that whole thing. They rented a house in California, and Bobby went there with her husband in her white gloves and hat, and they were like she says they were the most overdressed individuals in the whole crowd. When the official came out, to officiate at the wedding and everything. This was early 1970s, so I don't need to say anything more. But it's a really fun chapter, and
that's in the book. That's
in the book. She's just
good.
Recounts that whole thing about Majel Barrett at the time, and you'll just have to read it. It's really an eye opener. She was very open about the impoverished conditions that they had, because his dad died tragically. He was only 29 years old.
Yeah. About Steve Poe's dad. Yeah.
Steve Poe's dad died at a work-related accident. He fell off a huge ladder while he was working on a warehouse in California, in Tulare there, and contracted tetanus and died from that. And so this was like in the midst of the Depression. And so she talks about how her and her two brothers, because there was three originally, and they just didn't have anything. And so that was really fascinating, how that affected his life, Stephen's life, and his interest to pursue a career in flying, how he flew for the Marines later on, and then had some...
I didn't know any of this. This is
awesome.
I mean, good on you.
Yeah, again, it's like, we read about Stephen and we don't really know much about him. So and she just opened up with photographs and
Oh,
stories
wow.
of life, which I think really is I always thought a really interesting biopic. There's always buzz about doing a biopic of Gene Roddenberry. I thought an excellent biopic would be to have it told, the creation of Star Trek told through the eyes of Stephen Whitfield. I think it would be fascinating because they
Oh,
were very, very close. They were very close. They worked together quite closely. And as you remember, Gene Roddenberry gave Stephen 50% of the proceeds from the making of Star Trek, which was unheard of. Unheard of at the time. Unheard of.
well, I always notice that they share a byline the way there's the infamous story about Gene writing lyrics to the theme song, so
Right.
the Courage wouldn't get all the royalties, all the residuals
Right.
of it. And
so they were. He was pitching pennies throughout. He had to at the time. Gene
yeah,
Roddenberry did, but
yeah,
to show that generosity, that that much really, I think, spoke volumes about the closeness of the two. And they were both pilots too, and that went a long way.
yeah. I had no idea that about Stephen.
Yeah. Stephen was a pilot as well, so they had a lot in common. And then, of course, he gave Stephen the second prototype, the D7, the Klingon model, appreciation for all of his work and contributions to not only the making of Star Trek, but the model kits, because the Klingon kit went on to be phenomenally successful, just like the Enterprise model kit did as well. So
yeah, but so AMT's origins, and then the plastic kit, and then Steve Poe and all that. But you've got even more here about what's the biggest surprise? Is that fair to say? Especially from some of these less traveled areas like NASA and the Smithsonian, like something from.
You mean what the stories that I ran across?
Yeah. Just what was the most surprising to you? A lot of this is going to be surprising to us readers.
Well, I think one of don't want to give away too many of the beans.
Well, that's true. I don't want to do that. But I'm just curious if you had a holy shit moment, as you were researching.
One of the things that I was fascinated with, because my background is history as well as history of science and technology, and working for NASA, I'm always interested in the NASA connections. I think one of the biggest surprises was learning more about Harvey Lin. Because Harvey Lin, we know a lot about him through making a Star Trek and also through advertising. Gene Roddenberry, always the Barker, promoting the show, which rightfully so as a showrunner would always tout the Rand connection to Star Trek. And I was always fascinated by that. I mean, how extensive was that? What was involved? And you'll see, of course, on Rand's webpage, and you'll see this even now, if you go out there and do a search, Rand Star Trek, you will see on their webpage on the front, they actually respond to Harvey Lin as a technical consultant, that he never actually was employed by Rand to do research for Star Trek. But Gene Roddenberry would promote that over and over very early on, and rightly so, because he wanted, that science connection, that hard science connection. And Rand was up there, Research and Development Corporation. They were the movers and shakers post-war that helped guide the government, in their nuclear program.
And the first one, they were the prototype for think tanks.
I mean, there was DARPA, or there were others as well, but Rand was one of the big ones that was kind of the big experiment about how government and the titans of industry could kind of come together, and do consulting, for good things, for large planned programs, that went outside of the Manhattan Project, which wasn't a Rand program, but it was kind of an example of how we could do things like that. And so I was really intrigued with the connection. And was Harvey Lin actually a physicist? Because you'll see, him quoting, physicists at Rand Corporation helped consult with Star Trek, and all. And he wasn't. Harvey Lin was not. He wasn't a physicist. He was a chemical engineer. He was a chemical engineer.
Oh, okay.
He had a 4-year degree. He went to Texas, and then worked in chemical weapons and things like that, as part of, he's in World War II and so forth. So the background of Harvey Lin coming forward was really interesting, and it was more of a surprise, because I really did think, that he was this big PhD physicist or whatever, because his notes, his comments and everything, seen them, are very sharp. I mean, this man definitely had a background, okay? So, but it wasn't the background that we thought, or we were kind of conveyed to believe.
And no instant Googling. So if he's firing off these notes back to Gene, it's 3 or 4 days, but there's also mail, and they're not faxing even. they're,
Right.
Unless he has a runner. But and it's Southern California, but still there's traffic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so either he knew the stuff or he had people he could turn right there and talk to or get on the phone and say, what do you
Yeah.
think about this? But even to know to respond to something like just those basic notions in the very beginning, like, well, maybe we shouldn't call it, Capella or Rigel. Maybe we should just make up a star name because this will be
Right.
a definite, or maybe you shouldn't call it laser. That's going to be outdated really fast.
Call it something else. He didn't say phaser at that point, but he said,
Right.
Memos about they're going to have something more. Let's think of something else, to
So
call
either he had the wherewithal to think of, even as just a chemical engineer, he had the wherewithal to think about those big picture concepts,
his
or at least to ask someone else about it once he had the notion.
Yeah. His fingerprints are all over the place in the early development, because he was one of the first that came on aboard along with Kellum DeForest. Now I have a chapter devoted to Kellum DeForest as well.
Well, that's awesome.
And so, but Harvey Lynn was one, I wanted to know more about him, to find out more about him. And fortunately, his son, he had 2 boys. He had Harvey Lynn the third, which unfortunately he passed away a number of years ago, but his surviving son is still around. So I was able to talk with him and get more information, as well as photographs. There's another one that was one person. Now, Stephen Whitfield, there was a photograph of him like in the 1960s that was kind of circulating around, but there was absolutely nothing on Harvey Lynn. No photographs or anything out there. And so I was really pleased to get some of that and include in the book from his son.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking. It's making me mad that I don't have his Voyager book right here, because there's no photos in the making of. They didn't do actor heads, author heads.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember because I have an image in my mind, and I don't know that I took any picture. Pre cell phones. I don't know that I took a picture with Stephen. I should have, and I wish I had. But it's just like my Gene moment. I didn't have a camera or something. We didn't have cameras every moment of the day.
But Harvey Lynn, that was.
But I'm glad you've got. This is amazing. I'm glad you've got all this about them.
Well, I'm glad this, to get the information out there. I mean, the book has over 500 endnotes, so it can be a reference for future scholars and future.
Wait a minute. The actual book is only 40 pages. What?
Yes, that's right. It's well referenced. Well,
here we go. Just to be fair, this is the endnotes.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, and there's the book. But these endnotes are, you have paragraphs. So these
I what happened is my publisher had a limit of kind of how many words that I could use, but that didn't include endnotes. They don't count the endnotes. So it's like, well, I'm going to have to edit this out. I'm going to have to. So I just added them to endnotes, and I have some rather long endnotes, which are basically text that I couldn't include in the main body. Because
that endnote section still includes photos, letters, memos, documents, and things.
Yeah, there's 170 photographs in there that they put throughout. So we were able to get a lot of the photographs in there throughout the thing.
Well, even those letters and the documents, yeah.
But yeah, the Harvey Lynn connection was really good, because another thing that surprised me too was that Harvey Lynn left early, and you probably ran across this too, Larry. He didn't stay through beyond the first season, which I thought was really unusual, because
I knew he petered. I didn't know if he. I hadn't seen a timeline, but I knew past the pilots he wasn't near, because they were using Kellum DeForest.
Right. Well, Kellum DeForest, and that was the interesting thing too. You'll read, my first chapter in the book is about Harvey Lynn, because I was so interested in him and what I found. And then Kellum DeForest is the second chapter, and these two were together with the technical advisors for Star Trek, and their backgrounds are different. Kellum DeForest came from Yale University. His background was history. Harvey Lynn was chemistry, and military background, career military at that. So they had different backgrounds, different lives. As far as Kellum DeForest was a little bit more well off than Harvey Lynn. Harvey Lynn, there's a story where his son Dennis was telling me about how his dad had to pawn the silverware every year to come up with money for his books when he was going to college. So, it was just all these little interesting things about these two individuals. But Kellum DeForest, he had a professional fact-checking service. I call him a professional nitpicker. I'm not the first to use that,
Right.
but his script clearance service, which I'm sure, Larry, you know about a lot about as well, was critical for the industry as a whole. And so Star Trek was just one of his clients, okay, where he had this industry, whereas Harvey Lynn actually was sought out by Gene Roddenberry to give the science background, and then Harvey Lynn worked on doing this consulting outside of his job. He was not paid by Rand to do this. He just did this as a hobby, if you will, or as a passion, because it's something that he was interested in. But he left after the first season, and I was curious about why he did. And I talk about this in the book, and I have a theory that he left because Rand Corporation got uncomfortable with the number of times that Gene Roddenberry was connecting Rand as an entity to Star Trek, as though Rand was a contract, that Rand was
very publicly, right?
Hired by them, where Harvey Lynn was not. He was just doing this on the side. He worked for Rand as full time, as assigned by the Air Force to work and consult with Rand on the payroll. But this Star Trek thing, that was something on his own that ran, just in the side. So I think Rand got a little bit uncomfortable by the number of times that Gene Roddenberry was connecting.
It sounds like this was all on Gene, not on Harvey.
Right, exactly. And so I think there was probably a conversation with perhaps his superiors at one point or another, Harvey Lynn, and said, you need to go. You need to remove yourself from this, because he cuts it off after that. He cuts that off after the first year. Now, Harvey Lynn does come back, and he actually consults with the animated series, among others. So he does come back later and does some consultation, with Star Trek later on. But as far as his major contributions to the original series, they ended after the first season, which was really a shame, because he did so many key things, as you mentioned, the phaser and other things, tractor beams, he talked about that, and other things. Makes you wonder what he could have done if he continued on for the second and third season as well.
Yeah. Well, or if they would have if he continued second season, if he would have survived the budget cuts and the change in tone for third season. Yeah.
Whereas Kellum stayed throughout the whole thing, and he even worked on the motion picture as well. Kellum just kept contributing.
Well, he did that. Well, basically, Kellum DeForest was the internet and Google before it was available.
Right, exactly.
I talk about the paper and stamps days. So he had, and then then Joan Pierce inherited the office, and I've just gone blank on his name. We had him as a Portal 47 guest. Joan's protege that was there. He was there as a young kid.
Right, Joe. I forget his name. Yeah, I talk about him because his dad worked for TV Guide. He wrote for TV Guide, among others. His dad did. Yeah.
Sloan? That's not his name.
Yeah, it's. I have to look it up.
Something close. But anyway, but that's like and he's like not young at all, but he's still very much with it. And it's like, but it's almost like librarians on steroids kind of people. And pre-Google, pre-internet, they just literally had an office crammed, their own library archive crammed with every kind of reference on every kind of subject.
Yep.
Do you need an ancient map? It's over here. Do you need cutting edge physics research? It's over here.
Yep.
And they would write those notes. And so, it's the Kellum DeForest stuff. And then, and then Joan Pierce through the Berman era. And then our last guy, not the modern era. They've got Dr. I mean, then they got into having science advisors and Narain Shankar, and then Andre Bermanis, and now Dr. Aaron and Mohamed Noor on the modern shows. But that DNA, to get back to your whole book here, that DNA about the mix of real science and real world fact extrapolated into the future that Gene insisted on. Because if it wasn't that the geeks hadn't won yet, it's like no one knew the geeks existed.
Right. They were out there in mass.
Right, but nobody even, like, science fiction was bug-eyed monsters to most people, and Gene was fighting for respect and tying it to and here's NASA, right? And it's like it wasn't, it wasn't at a time when you'd have to invent everything. Well, people are already excited about, going to the moon and the space race, and how do we tie in and piggyback? Not just in a crass way, but because he wanted the show to be grounded, to be respected for what he wanted to do. And he used to say, if we're going to have drama, people have to respect that these are real human beings on a real ship. They're not just, oh, they're out in space facing monsters with ray guns.
Right.
You're not going to believe the humanity of the drama if you don't believe their world. So,
well, it helped an awful lot too, and I talk about this in the aerospace industry contributions in general. The fact that Southern California was home to 70% of our aerospace industry at that time.
Yeah.
The clear blue skies, and fair weather that drew Hollywood, also was fantastic for flying experimental aircraft, and so that was not overlooked.
You have Edwards right up the road, and yeah.
And access to all these, you had Hughes Aircraft and all of these companies, Lockheed, and all of those located, relatively close to the studios. And so you had these individuals back when
the internet was in Burbank.
Yeah, you could walk over to them and say, hey, can I, and some, I talk about the K-7 space station, the story about the dumpster diving of the models that were thrown out by Douglas Aircraft. I go into that a little bit more detail. That was one of the earlier ones that I was researching when I was at NASA Johnson Space Center, was that connection. It's because the model was salvaged that Douglas had for a proposed space station, that that they engineers were working on, or talking about, presenting papers about in 1957-58, and they built this model, and the models were there. You can see the center pod is of the model for the space station was salvaged, and that's the center pod for the K-7, and then the three smaller pods, those were there. And then of course Richard Dayton talks about that at length in Noel Dayton's book, about creating the Enterprise. He actually draws upon his log and notes about what he did and the changes that he made to it and everything. So there's a very visible, iconic connection to the aerospace industry that most fans will relate to, is the Trouble with Tribbles with the space station.
Yeah.
And its creation.
Well, listen, we've been at it for a good while. So
when you're having fun.
I know. Well, let me ask you, what do you think is, and this is like picking among your kids. I ask about you personally, and without giving us too much of a spoiler, what do you think? And I'm trying to emphasize that I think a wide variety of fandom is going to enjoy this for a lot of different reasons. But what do you think, like the biggest surprise that's a typical fan reader is going to find? Is that a fair question? Like, what do you wait? Is there something you're like, oh, I can't wait till you read this, or I can't wait till you get to this part?
It depends on the fan too, of how well versed they are in Star Trek. I don't talk a lot about Star Trek as far as Star Trek 101, because there's a huge fan base out there already that you don't have to get up to speed. But I think for those individuals that are younger and that are coming into Star Trek with the new things that are out, I think they will appreciate the heritage. What is it? Lower Decks, Below Decks, the animated series, which often has puns and references. That show goes so fast. They talk so fast. It's hard for me as a 60-plus-year-old to follow it sometimes, but it's a great show.
You're like Pike and his crew talking about that very. Right. They all talk so fast.
Yeah, I have a 17-year-old, and he really enjoys that, along with Strange New Worlds. We bond an awful lot between those two shows because they do such a great job of bringing the past, the original Star Trek, and referencing it. So I think younger people will find the book and they will appreciate what their dad and grandparents liked about Star Trek, because now they can track it. They can track the trek of Star Trek and see how these industries and individuals helped create the original series, and the chemistry that was involved. Gene Roddenberry bringing on a lot of these individuals who had military backgrounds, worked in the aerospace industry, and so forth. So they'll see a lot of that, and it's laid out, I think, in a very readable fashion, in a narrative that they can follow. So I think they'll enjoy that as a good reference.
Yes. And there's just a lot of goodies. There's just so many goodies.
And the photos too are great.
The documents, the chart, like the maps of things, like the Smithsonian exhibit map.
The floor plan, and then the little timeline that my friend Carl Tate contributed a lot of the graphics and everything to the
Oh,
book
good.
research. And a lot of followers of this know Carl Tate. He's a walking encyclopedia. He's a wonderful resource. But he put together this really nice timeline of the Enterprise and the Smithsonian, so people can see where it's moved around. You know, its different locations and what was to it as it made its way in the 50 plus years of being.
That's scary to think about, that it's been there for 50.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
oh, I thank you. I hadn't thought of it that way until you just said it. But yeah,
half a century that they've had that model, that model there at the Smithsonian. I actually we did a design, a commemorative logo of that, featuring a painting that Franz Joseph did, that was going to be for a postage stamp for the Life in the Universe exhibit that never made it. It was a 10-cent postage. You can see how old it was. It was a 10-cent postage stamp.
Cool.
Artwork of Franz Joseph, the stamp that's on there, and we did a little commemorative logo.
Now
of that.
I have to. That's. I had no idea. Now I have to get out in touch with Bill Kraft, who ran the stamp petition drive for ages.
Yeah, there it is, right there. It's kind of a glare, but you'll see it. That's a you don't see a lot, or at least in the Star Trek world, you see the line art that he's done, you know, through the technical manuals and so forth, and his blueprints, of course, but you don't see his dimensional art, you know, using color. And this is full color that he did of the Enterprise against a fictitious world with, you know, Life in the Universe, Smithsonian on the bottom, and then U.S. postage stamp. Unfortunately, that artwork, I found a slide. That's all that exists of it.
Oh, come on, Glenn. That was Vulcan. Come on, you know that was Vulcan.
Yes, right.
That's opening titles, Vulcan.
Talos 4. They're all Talos 4.
They're all Talos 4. Let me dive in here and look at the. No, I was going to say, I have to tell Bill Kraft. I don't know if he knows that or not, that they were pushing a stamp at that time, because he ran a stamp petition campaign for ages, and then when they finally did the Celebrate the Century.
Right.
He was a special guest in all of that. But
he did a book too on that journey, I think.
Yes.
The stamp. I just got a copy of that. I didn't know that he put a book together. That was a huge effort, by the way, for him.
Okay, now it's here. I should. Yeah.
That's it. That's what I got. 33 cents. So you know how old that book is.
So this is from but he has all the letters from celebrities and politicians and people of gravitas pushing. Yes, there should be a Star Trek stamp.
Yeah. That artwork, it was sent to the Postmaster General, but they never returned it. So we don't know where the original artwork is. It's one of those things that maybe will still crop. I hate to think that somebody threw it away. But fortunately, he took a slide of it, and the slide is on file in the archives at the Smithsonian.
Wow.
My book.
Yay, Smithsonian archivists.
Yeah.
I hope after this year there are still. See, that's the kind of thing that some people think is not worth spending money on right now. Yeah. If we're losing space missions, well, I feel like we're certainly listening to people that keep up with the archives.
Right. No, the Enterprise, I think, you know, is amazing to. I was just there a couple of years ago doing some more research at the Air and Space Museum when they open, you know, part of the wing, you know, they're doing it in quarters or thirds or whatever as they complete
the reopening.
Yeah, the reopening. And it's so great to see the model still there and people gathered around it with the Bob McCall mural in the background, and people just, you know, looking at this thing and being inspired by it and being appreciative of it. It's not controversial. You know, the Enterprise itself, you don't have people throwing red paint at it, you know, like some things. It is something that I think is unanimous as far as its goal. It's looking forward to the future. And I think it's just wonderful that it's been placed in the Smithsonian and will continue, you know, be there in the.
I mean, about the most political that gets are the difference of interpretive opinion. The hard asses who say this is a fictitious starship, you know, thing. It's a Hollywood creation. It has, you know, how dare it be in this hall dedicated to real life,
right?
You know, heroes and spacecraft and aeronautics.
Yeah.
And those are the people that you just want to, you know, well, these real life aeronautics might not have existed the way they do or come along when they did, if not for the inspiration of these.
Exactly. And you'll see in my book on the chapter there, the correspondence, because the Smithsonian was very much aware of because there, believe it or not, there were individuals at the time that were hesitant about putting that model on display and having it on display because, it's this huge model, from a science fiction show, 11 foot. I mean, it's big and everything. Do we really want to have something like that? What are we trying to convey? What are we trying to convey the message? And so I go at length and talk about that because they were toying around with that about how do we make sure that we display this as being not just a fictitious prop from a movie that was seen on television, or a real prop for a fictitious, television series that we see on television, but that it was an inspiration, that it would motivate individuals about the future, looking to the future, just like Jules Verne, which we cover in other exhibits, and other individuals, H.G. Wells and so forth. Motivated individuals with their vision, what tomorrow looked like. And so they continued with that narrative, even, with the 1992 exhibit, which we talked about earlier, the 25th anniversary exhibit. Right. That was a phenomenal exhibit. I mean, that was the first time the Smithsonian ever had to do a ticketed, event, because people just wrapped around the blocks, of the museum to see that exhibit.
Yeah, it was just very disappointing to see the restoration that was done at the time and the interpretations that were taken, and why Margaret's the 50th anniversary one for 2016. I feel like it not only let it come out of the closet or come out of the gift shop cafeteria basement, but restored it, and also did basic research. When they attacked that like it was a mummy from Egypt,
Right.
And they got the paint chips from different, and all the originals.
X-rays,
Yeah, X-rays and scans. And they did Starfleet, they did Spock and Data proud with the amount of research they did on that.
No, and that's why I think my book makes a good complement to the story of that. You have the artifact and the wonderful restoration work that they have done with that. And mine tells the story of how it got there, how the model got there originally, and, how I touch a little bit about the restoration, of course, but again, that's beyond the time frame that I have. I was more curious about how it got.
Right. Well, the later on it's documented. I'm just, now all this talk has made me curious about, now I want to sit down with Margaret and see if she had headwinds to approaching. If the stars of the 50th of Star Trek and the new building coming, and just enough time had gone by since the 90s for people to say, oh, this is, because fans would go and it's like, why is the Enterprise in the basement in the cafeteria or the gift shop? It's behind that glass, and it's not treated well. And it just takes time for sometimes those things the eddies and currents to come back around.
No, she's done a great job. And there's a neat connection between her position too and that exhibit, the 1992 exhibit, that you'll read a little bit about.
Okay. I'll look for that. You want to do some questions? I think we've got some questions here, comments, people. So this is Melanie. And, we're talking, famously the 3-foot desk model disappeared. I say desk model, he kept it on. They used it to shoot with. Came back, and now it's tied up in this dispute about the storage unit people and the bidders and all that. Do you touch on any of that in here, or the 3-footers origins, or the mystery?
Yeah, I touch on it briefly. Basically, the extent of what I touch on in the book is that it was found, because it was found after the Greg Jean auction, a couple of years ago. It was around Halloween, I think, when it found. So you had the big Greg Jean auction, the Heritage auction, which I attended and talked with people, interviewed people, and that was in early October, and then followed by this eBay posting of the 3-foot model. And so I touch upon that a little bit, but I don't go into it a lot because, it's a hot potato.
Yeah, exactly. And what can you say? And it's an ongoing story. So
the pending litigation,
it exists.
I think as fans, we hope it'll all get resolved eventually, and it belongs in a museum type, happy end. I'm hoping at some point that'll all get resolved, but I don't go into much on it, because other than just the pure delight, which I think we all share, that it was found, that the model is out there, that it's not at the bottom of a swimming pool, as Rod Roddenberry, as supposedly the story goes, that was found. And you can find on the internet more detailed backgrounds where they're piecing the story together, which I think is interesting. How it ended up where it is.
Yeah. So not really a question, but Christoph is saying, don't tell everything. Nobody will buy the book.
Yes.
So let me ask you though. So I know you have a site. It's on Amazon. Do you have a preferred place you want people to go to get it?
You can order it from me because I can send you signed copies. You could just contact me through Facebook because I'm on Facebook under Glen Swanson, and you can contact me through that, or you can send me an email, and I will make sure to give you the details. You can PayPal me or whatever to purchase the book from me, and I'll send it to you signed. You can certainly order it through Amazon as well, or through my publisher Schiffer Books on their webpage, and they will send it to you. I'm just catching up on book orders right now, as you can imagine. I was at Shore Leave 45 just last week, or a little over a weekend ago, doing their convention there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Shore Leave had been around for a long time in Baltimore. I used to go to their convention just as a fan, but I was invited this time to come and speak and do a book premiere because the timing of the book was such that literally it was a premiere party. I picked up copies of the book at the warehouse just before the convention because they had just arrived at the warehouse before July 4th, and the convention was the following weekend. And so, and Glen, which is where Schiffer's located, is just 20 miles south of Lancaster. And so I was able to pick up copies to sell, and sign at the convention.
That's awesome. At Shore Leave. So how did it go?
Oh, it went really well.
Was it hot potatoes? I mean, what was
it's not a huge convention, but it was great. The hosts were great. They were fantastic. It's the first time I had ever attended it as, a speaker. We had a wonderful panel discussion where I brought out Anne DeForest, who is the daughter of Kellum DeForest.
Oh, good.
Karen Schnaubelt, daughter of Franz Joseph Schnaubelt, was there. Greg Kennedy, who worked at the Smithsonian during the time when the Enterprise arrived in the 1970s, was there. And then Barbara Brennan, whose picture is right on the cover here. That's her. She used to work for the Smithsonian as an exhibits. She created the exhibit. She was involved. This photo here is the time when they removed the Enterprise from where it was at the Smithsonian and were prepping it for the 1992 exhibit. So that photo was taken pre-Ed Miriaki, but he was involved in the 1992 exhibit. So we had all of those individuals plus me. So we had 5 individuals total on the panel that gave a discussion. We had a 2-hour panel because each of us spoke about 20 minutes, all 5 of it, and it was great. I was so grateful.
Was it videoed?
The panel discussion wasn't videoed, but then there was a follow-on discussion at NASA Goddard that I was invited to on Monday. And I went there and talked, and then we had Anne DeForest and Barbara Brennan speak in a panel discussion there at NASA Goddard. And my understanding is that was filmed because we had to sign waivers and everything for it. And it will be posted on YouTube eventually at some location.
I'm just saying that collection you had for your panel at Shore Leave, and you had,
Yeah, that one, as far it wasn't.
Maybe taped. Some fan in the audience taped it, maybe.
It wasn't, it was
great. Or at least audio taped.
Yeah. It wasn't, there was no, that I know of. I mean, we didn't have to sign any papers or anything, and I didn't see cameras there. So, it wasn't taped. But that went really well. It was a great premiere party for the book at their Meet the Pros event that they had, which brought out a lot of the, authors that were there. And the timing of it just worked perfectly for the premiere. But so I've been going since then, and I'm trying to fulfill my Kickstarter backer orders, which are like 127 of them. So I'm busy mailing those out.
Well, my assistant Scott got his book, so I heard
oh, great
on that, and Doug got his book. Doug's posting his photo.
Yeah.
So apparently they're getting out there. Yeah.
I'm trying to get, and then the orders are finally arriving from Amazon as well, from pre-orders, so that they're filling, but they're selling very, very well. My publisher says that they've been doing exceptionally well, for only being out now for only about 2-3 weeks, where they're actually available in the warehouse and they're filling orders. So, I'm just anxiously awaiting reviews, on Amazon, because now it's out. So it's like
well, you have a blurb from me, so.
What do fans think of it? Are they going to praise it or are they going to pan it? So we'll see what happens.
I don't understand how anybody, I mean, you've just I said this in my blurb, but you've done so much original legwork research here. Like I haven't had a chance to read it. I knew some top lines, but when you talk about tell him to Forrest's daughter, and and found, and Harvey Lynn's descendants and all of this, I'm like, and those extra, the whole ream of photos from the Dryden visit and who all was there. It's already, my mind is already spinning about how I'm going to steal from all this, not steal, how I will piggyback. We will propagate from your basic research and do some Trek files and
that's the intent. I think the paper trail is substantial enough in there so that if there are any issues, and I hope people do respond, because my editor's already talking about doing a second edition, because he said, accumulate your error list so that we can, go into the second edition. And so readers, if there's something out there that they find not quite right or whatever, let me know, contact me, because.
Or if there's a chapter 2 or a chapter 8 to a story, right? You get into, and here's
something more. So, I'm hoping that will make the, second edition and multiple editions down the road. I don't know if I'll get up to 20 editions like the Making of Star Trek. That thing had so many editions.
He never added the third season.
Oh my gosh. Millions of copies at that thing. So I
just thought it would be around forever. I never thought about it when I was a kid. I just thought that would be.
And each edition, they would print 250,000 of these things. I mean, they had their standard print runs, and this thing just kept coming out and coming out and coming out and multiple.
Well, when you're the only book about something,
that's right. At that time, to feed a critical point in time of fandom when there wasn't much.
Something is blowing up, and no internet. Yeah. So Dan says here, speaking of Stephen Poe, his vision of the future is the Voyager book, and it has So there's
I have a copy of that book. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I do have a copy of
I read it back in the day. It just flooded back as all the years. I mean, I talk about how I did star charts as my first reaction to Star Trek, but really my first thing I ever did was after I read Making a Star Trek and I wanted to refer to it, there's no index. And I have it somewhere, but I literally pulled out sections and made my own friggin' combination concordance tech manual, although I didn't know what that was then. But I basically did an index and said, transporters, phasers, tricorders, blah, 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 Starfleet, started, and went through and did my own. I mean, I kind of did the writer's guide in reverse, but I pulled everything out of Making of and just retyped it and took a couple, and I hand drew some of the diagrams, like the bridge layout and the deck layout, because so now I could refer to something, because it was, otherwise you were like flipping back and forth, dog-earing your copy, trying to find where he talked about this or that or the other, and some of it was, he would have things, and what inspired French Joseph was like, he said, well, we never had the money to do holograms, holographic chambers, but that's what I want to do. And that was, it wasn't just the rec deck and the animateds before the holodeck. It was, if they'd had the money or another season, they would have had holographic stuff in the 60s, because that was a known science. Anyway, I got off.
Yeah. Well, the Making of Star Trek, I still have my 10th printing of the book that came out in 72 with the blue phasers firing on the cover. I never cared much for the first print cover, which had kind of this pinkish hue to it with Kirk and Spock and the miniature hanging. It didn't look right, but when they came out with the planar one, which just had the Enterprise, that favorite shot, that classic shot with the matte lines and everything.
With the 70s Googie font.
Right, with the matte lines of the phasers, showing, you see the square cut off, where it's like, okay, they didn't quite get it right. But that one is my Making of Star Trek. And then they came out with, the silver covered with a little television tube silhouette. But that first one was
this was mine.
Yeah. I had the one in your.
This one isn't quite as bad as the one you're talking about, but I came into some of these to give to people when I Mine, the one that Stephen Poe finally split here, so I've put it back. The one that Stephen signed.
Yeah, mine Mine
This
is
is what we're talking, kids. Yeah.
Mine is in the scratch pad stage where the pages just kind of tear out.
I said, you have a photo.
Oh yeah, I've got it. I have it in a plastic bag. I don't have the heart to toss it away because it still has.
No. You don't do
But
that.
I
Your
got
mom would have done that,
Oh.
but you don't.
I kept it, and actually, this is funny. I actually was looking to get it encased in acrylic. I said I was going to do this. I was going to encase this thing in acrylic because
A little cat's paw making of.
But I can't find anyone that encases books because the paper, I guess, or whatever. It was hard to do.
You have to shrink wrap it first and then do it. Yeah.
So
Let me dive in the chat here. So, hey, Derek, shout out, who works in visual effects. When he was at Lucasfilm, some of his favorite folks were the reference librarians. Yes, even with digital assets, having those original sources.
Oh, these people knew a lot. I mean, Anne would say again and again that her dad, Anne DeForest, her dad just had a phenomenal memory. Even into his 90s, they would play Trivial Pursuit, and he would come out ahead. I mean, he was just sharp up through the end. He could remember facts and figures. And by the way, for your followers out there, his whole collection was donated to UCLA and the Kellum DeForest the Kellum DeForest collection, and it's massive.
Oh my God!
The reference finding aid for that thing, I forget how many linear feet of collection is, because he did hundreds of television shows and movies, so he has all this reference material.
He was the go-to Hollywood guy for when you needed something, and a lot of times it wasn't just imagination; it was like legal clearance.
Right. Exactly.
Like, we want to name this character George Washington. Has there ever been a George Washington history that would sue us?
Right. And the legal clearance was the big driving force for the longevity, because of lawsuits. It's like, well, we don't want this person named that because they could sue us or whatever. And so, yeah.
Who are you going to call?
Yeah.
They had a niche, and the internet's taken away a lot of that, but there's still people
they still do that. Yeah. There's still
physically do the checking. Yeah.
Right. And that whole process of form and everything is they even refer to it in the standard, a DeForest form. That he pioneered the way that they go through each page of their script, with column format and how they.
Now for Star Trek, it's for newbie fans. It's been decades of people getting Kellum DeForest and DeForest Kelly confused for 5 seconds,
right,
until they get past it. Yeah. So. So my figure here is saying, maybe because where I grew up, but I've always thought of NASA and Trek as something goes, well, you're totally right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Yes, of course it is.
Star Trek and Star Trek needed NASA. That's actually a subtitle.
And Dan, yes, we should have mentioned, I love to say his name, Jesko von Puttkamer, who is a kind of a driving, interesting figure. Did you have...
70s, in the 70s.
Did you touch on Jesko at all?
Yeah, I touch on him a little bit because he's out at the rollout for the OV-101, the Enterprise. And Nichelle Nichols talks about him a lot in her work with, she was hired to do this promotional campaign and effort to bring in minorities, people of color and so forth, into NASA's astronaut program. And she talked Woman in Motion, you remember that, her company. And she did a film on that.
And the documentary. Well, she did a movie at the time, but now in the documentary about her that's out.
Yeah, and he's interviewed extensively in that, and also remembered quite fondly of inspiring her, to do this.
Well, I didn't realize at the time, but all the I started to say the crap, all the stuff you could get from Lincoln that was flat and easy to get to mail. His science notes. He's the one who basically gave us the second generation modern interpretation of how warp drive works. Like getting into the matter, and at the matter and antimatter. Well, the matter is actually sluiced deuterium.
Okay.
And you need magnetic. They kind of knew this because they talk about the magnetic pod, the antimatter pods in the original series. But he's the one who kind of leaned it out and said, okay, and here's what dilithium will do. Dilithium will be the filter that the output goes through to be warp plasma. But he's the one that kind of conceptualized it for the motion picture, because they built the engineering set off of his notes. And that is there's been the big debate about retconning engineering from the original series. And no, it's not at the saucer. It should be down in, we saw a saucer section engineering and all of that debate, but it all changed. And then every modern iteration since is kind of based on his his conceptualizing and his science notes for the most
Oh yeah,
part.
he was very much a popularizer. He would speak quite a bit, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Carl Sagan. They were contemporaries at the time. They often spoke together. So yeah, all in the 70s in particular.
People are giving all up and down the line. People are giving shout outs to the Apollo 11 anniversary. And I always say, when people say, oh, it's the anniversary of the moon landing, it's the anniversary of the first moon landing, because it happened 12, 14, 15, 16. So it happened 5 more times,
right.
know.
And you that earlier photo that you showed of Michael Collins, who was on the
Right.
Apollo crew, holding the Enterprise and holding the Klingon ship as he was director of the Air and Space Museum. I speak quite fondly of Michael Collins because he was a very down-to-earth individual, unlike a lot of astronauts who, drove around with Corvettes, fast cars, Mustangs, and things like that. Michael Collins, that wasn't in his DNA.
He was not the flyboy. Yeah.
He was not the flyboy. There's one really fun memo that I found when he was first taking the position at the Air and Space Museum as director. There was a memo that went out by his administrative office that told people welcome to him and everything. It says, and Michael Collins has a reserved parking space because the museum wasn't built yet. They were constructing it, so they had, parking was kind of at a premium that was relatively close to everything. And he said, Michael Collins will have a parking spot that's his as the new director of the Air and Space Museum. And then the person who wrote the memo together made a point to say, and he drives a Volkswagen. So, to make sure that if they see a Volkswagen parked into the director's spot, they're not going to tow it away.
It's not a Caddy. It's not a Lincoln. It's not a,
But I thought that was so funny to see that memo out there and, say.
He is humble that way. The one thing I remember out of all the documentaries and everything is about Apollo 11 is at some point, I forget who was the anyway, the same Capcom that's on for the landing and everything and the first steps and all of that, There's one thing where they say, it's like somebody says, or he says, well, Michael, I guess you're about the only person anywhere who's the only one that can't see these pictures. And he says, that's okay, I don't mind a bit. It's like, of course not. They weren't streaming it where he could watch on his phone in the capsule, in the command module. Right. And it was like he's the only person who didn't have access to watching the moon, their moonwalk. Yeah,
he's a very good writer. I encourage especially younger followers of your show to read his book Carrying the Fire, which is just an eloquent accounting of the Apollo mission. He wrote this in the 1970s, after, of course, the famous moon landing. But he's a wonderful writer. He's written that, and there was another one that came out in the 80s called Liftoff. He's just he has a way of being able to describe things that just makes it so easy to understand what's going on.
A very everyman approach.
Yeah, and it's not a right stuff type style. It's like, it's just very down to earth, very humble, all shucks type thing. He never walked on the moon. Okay, he flew on Apollo 11. He flew in Gemini prior to that, and he didn't fly in any other Apollo missions after Apollo 11. So he was the closest to the moon, but not having to walk on it, for the first time. And he didn't mind that at all. He said, I was just very fortunate. I'm paraphrasing things that he said over the years. Yeah. I was just delighted to be there. I had no problem.
Well, technically, he and the 8 and 10 crews.
That's true. Right. Or Apollo 13.
That's the NASA kid in me going, now, wait a minute. I can nitpick on that.
Right.
Yeah. So Michael Grace says, Franz Joseph Schnabel mentioned everyone. And I always say Schnabel. I never say Franz Joseph. I always want people to know. And not just for his daughters mentioned. Everyone take a chug.
Yep.
Let's see. Derek says, okay, road trip time to the Smithsonian. Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, yeah, go out there. I mean, you mentioned you went 76 and you went to Williamsburg. I had to chuckle when you mentioned that, Larry. I did that as well. My dad was not. He was in the Navy.
It was an educational tour, and we were like 3 schools together. And we
went out in 78 because my brother was a senior in high school that fall, and so in the summer of 78, we went out there. We rented a motorhome, and I wanted to see the Enterprise, and I saw it, and I was absolutely thrilled to buy the postcards and the posters, of the Enterprise, and bring them back to my friends and said, I saw the Enterprise in person.
So Melanie met Yesko on a panel in 75.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Derek, sorry you missed. I know. I feel pain that I meant to go. Greg was on the West Coast, all the way over in Santa Monica-ish, and I would get over there occasionally, and I knew he had so much stuff crammed in his places that he just held on to. And I talked to him for the movies he worked on, but I regret not sitting down and getting longer interviews with him. But
I never met him. Of course, I've heard about him and everything. And even his legacy continues on with seeing things surface, from his collection, the stuff that he had in storage and everything. It's amazing, stuff, again, at the time, people didn't think much about. It's like, I'll pay you in this thing, because nobody wants this.
Yeah.
And he had
it's the great Casey Shafsky says, can't wait to receive. Everybody's excited about the book. Yay. Well, Dan, I don't know that they had any connection. He says the Enterprise and Discovery were rolled out when Planet of the Titans was in development. I mean, but separate dots. But I don't think the dots are connected, aside from just general Star Trek hoopla. But
I know one of the things I do talk about, and I just addressed this in an end note, is the discussion about how fans were cheated and not in renaming the Enterprise, or renaming OV-101, the space shuttle from Constitution, which is what it was going to be named because it was our bicentennial. And so,
but your guy, Mr. Grand Rapids, Gerald Ford.
Yeah, that's it. Gerald Ford
okayed it.
Was motivated enough by the fans, the many fans letters.
Well, he was running for re-election too. So
yes. So, and the renaming of it. And of course, the fans being, they won the battle but lost the war, so to speak, because they did get the name Enterprise on the side of a spaceship, but it never saw space. But I talk a little bit about, the discussion about how OV-101, yes, it never go into space, but there were plans on the board to convert it to a full space vehicle so that it would fly and join the fleet of the others. But it turned out, as they learned while they were building the other orbiters, that it was much more expensive and much more difficult to convert OV-101 to a flyable orbiter versus just building another one based upon what they learned.
Which is amazing.
So,
The curse of the prototype. Okay. Hey, everybody. Everybody say hi to Mike Sussman, noted Voyager and Enterprise writer, and many projects since then. I love Mike. And Mike is saying he always imagined as a kid that Kellum DeForest Research was a side hustle of DeForest Kellum. Because when you were a kid, you're like, how many people in the world have a name anywhere in their name of DeForest? Like, how common can that be? Hi, Mike. That's awesome. So yes, P, that was indeed the Mike Sussman that you just saw in the chat there. Here Derek is saying thank you for being on and doing this for the book. And thank you. So Dwayne is saying, is there any proof that Ford chose the name because of the letter writing campaign?
That's a good question. I know Dwayne. Thank you, Dwayne, for asking that quite well. That is something that I've wanted to research more, was the connection between the naming of the Enterprise from Constitution to Enterprise, and finding more documents that's out there. He definitely was influenced by it because of the number of people that were writing in, but was it the number one reason, that the name changed? Because I guess the thing we all have to remember is that Enterprise wasn't just the name of the starship, but it's also iconic seafaring vessel. So that had a lineage as well, just along with Constitution.
Proud war.
One could take Star Trek out of the picture entirely and not even, say that it was named after the Enterprise, and it'd still be a worthwhile name to consider in the maritime heritage. So, but that is definitely an article or two worth of material that one could explore further on the naming and the convention.
You're going to fill up that second book that revisions.
I'll have to fill up the second, or at least a good couple of articles in the Space Review, which I'm waiting for heavily.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I've kept you for a good long time, and we've had a good look who all's been dropping by in the chat. This is awesome. Thanks everybody. I think we should wrap it up there, unless there's some. What's the parting word here, author?
Buy my book.
And if they really want the coolest treatment,
you know, and I hope you enjoy it. Not only buy it, but bring some feedback. You know, do some reviews. Yeah. To say what's good, what's bad about it, because believe it or not, this is my first monograph. You know, I've edited before. I've founded a magazine and everything, which you read in my bio. But this is my first monograph, and that's an experience in itself, a learning experience, I should add. You know,
yeah,
one that for the past 6 years have really been everything. It's been everything, because it's taken
just doing the custom mailers up. I was like, well, you're spending some money on this, but it is so cool.
Yep.
Fanboy.
Read the book, get it. You get the version, borrow it from someone if you will, or buy it. And then, hey, let people know what you think of it. Let me know what you think of it. Let Larry know what you think of it. See if it's something that really is a contribution to the canon of Star Trek, the understanding of Star Trek, from its original days and creation.
I will answer that question generically to say I said it in my blurb, but it's a huge original research level contribution to Star Trek, but also just the way I think sociologists and culturists, whoever studies the way people interact and real life and our fictitious, what the Smithsonian exhibits got into it first. What's the connection between the fictional and the non-fictional, the real world and the inspirational world? And the way I've called it for years. I said, there's this natural NASA love affair with, like, I at one point had a connection to take a VIP tour at NASA Houston. And everywhere people would, because it was through some PR people, and people would stop. And when they heard just what I do, people want to stop and tell you their Star Trek story, because 3/4 of people in NASA are there because of Star Trek and Spock and or whatever, Data, whatever. And they want to talk Star Trek. And it's just, and then you see these pictures from the 60s, and you think, and the guys doing the Mariner missions and I get that was generic Martians with pointed ears, but it didn't hurt that Spock had just become a, cultural lightning rod, was on, Carol Burnett had Nimoy come over in makeup and be on her show the first season. So don't tell me that it wasn't already obviously grabbing hold of at least
it was out there. And that photo, you're talking about too, was something I checked with JPL because I wanted to see if there was a direct connection to Star Trek. If having those little ears on was a nod to Spock.
Spock or just generic Martian.
And they just weren't sure. There was no, and I've tried to track down, either some of the individuals in that photo, if they would still be around, they'd be quite old.
Or their kids. Yeah.
Relatives or people that perhaps worked with them that might recall more of the story behind that famous photo, because that photo's been out there before. Mm-hmm. And some said it could have been Venusians, because remember Venus also in Twilight Zone episodes and so forth. The point could be connected with that as well. But still, I can't help but we're aware of Star Trek and watched it, because it certainly was showing at the time of Mariner 5's encounter.
Yeah. Okay. I've got to let you go. So you want people to order it? You want them to catch you on your Facebook?
Yeah, just catch me on my Facebook. Okay. They can message me.
Glen 1N Swanson. Yes.
Just as Glen Swanson, contact me, friend me or whatever. And then if you want to order one, I can correspond through that. That's fine. And I'll send you, a signed copy directly from me. But if you're really anxious to get it really, really quick, because I'm still filling back orders, feel free to order it from Amazon and get it overnight or whatever, because they are filling their orders rather quickly now after the initial run or the initial release of it, when they got the data and everything. People are getting it. So, and then post reviews of it. Give me some feedback, what you think of it, because this is a reference work, but I think it's entertaining. There's a lot of photographs in there, a lot of new material that we touched on just briefly here. but let me know what you think of it as a new person to Star Trek or as an old person to Star Trek that has.
That's a good point too. I heard your shout out earlier. Yeah, we want to know if this is viable and valuable for all the newbies who are trying not to be overwhelmed with the 60-year franchise, but I think of them a lot.
And next year is the 60th anniversary, so I'm hoping the timing of it, I think, is good, because I know Paramount's working on things to roll out in conjunction with that. So I'm hoping to be able to pick up the book. More people will be aware of it then, because there'll be more attention. It doesn't seem possible that 60 years. Oh my gosh, we just passed the 50-year mark, right?
Well, that's the scary thing, is that the 50th has been 10 years ago. That's what's scary to me.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, we talk about 60th next year. A lot of us, like me, and thinking of people like Harvey Lynn. I always said Harvey P. Lynn.
Harvey Paul
the
Lynn.
60th was last year, because that's when they were doing The Cage, and that's when he was doing the bulk of his work. Was in 60th.
Yeah. I forget. Yeah, the pilots. Yeah, right.
I say you could start the party last year, folks. Yes.
Yeah.
Same thing I said at the 50th. Okay, Glenn, I will let you go. Congratulations. It's a huge achievement. I have watched you meticulously doing your posting and doing your research. So envious of all the nooks and crannies and rocks you're looking under for info and people.
I want to call out to all the individuals that helped me with that, because the acknowledgments section is like 5 or 6 pages. So I kind of stand on the shoulders of some of these other individuals as well, because so many people have, helped me as far as direct me, references and their experience and their reviews. So, a lot of the books that I'm mailing out are these individuals that have helped me in some way or another, just giving them copies. So, I'm kind of, I'm the writer, but these individuals are the ones that help feed me the information, to help me keep me on the right direction, to make sure that my Trek information is correct.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible achievement, and thanks once again. And thanks everybody for being with us today. I think I'm going to call it here, everybody. So I'll let Glenn go and wrap the show up. But thanks everybody for jumping in. We had some great folks in the chat today. That's awesome. It's good to see you, Mike, and everybody that was in today. And we will catch you later, Glenn. Hopefully I'll see you. You're going to be at Vegas too, also.
Yes. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I will be at Star Trek Las Vegas. I will be right next to the Tomy booth, where we're premiering
Speaking of the D7
model. I've got a table next to that I will be selling my books, and I'm also, talking about the Tomy model, because I was working on the team that helped design those models as well. So I will be there. And I will be selling books and signing copies. So if you get a chance to be at Star Trek Las Vegas,
and this year I won't let you sneak away before I get over to do a proper.
That's right. Or you're super busy too,
or lunch or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Good to see you. Enjoy your time here in SoCal, and we'll see you in a few days. Okay. It'll be here faster than assuming I survive San Diego. It'll be here real quick.
Coming up.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, everybody. Wow. Listen, as you could tell, Glenn and I could go on all day. Could you tell that I was so tickled to pick up some all new and again, I literally opened I had a PDF, but I haven't read the whole thing, and PDFs don't reflect a lot of time. They're just the manuscript, not all the photos and all the pictures. And you don't have to be a hardcore to love this. There's just way too much. And if you're an overlapping space nerd, if you're an overlapping historian, science, if you love, again, the mixing of cultures, if you love the 60s and 70s, it's all, this is just amazing. Glenn has done so much. I can't say this enough. So much primary research legwork. And yeah, he's crediting all the people that helped him, but somebody had to ramrod the damn thing. And so, I can't wait to get into it. Hopefully I'll take it down and some spare time in San Diego, get a lead on it. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I think we pretty much wore out the chat here, folks. Thanks everybody for coming in. I hear you, P, talking about the celebration of the 60th. What doesn't help is that Paramount is in such chaos right now with the leadership delayed, and what's the new leadership going to do? And then is their turnaround time once decision makers are in place that can do that. And we have down the road, we'll talk about just the entire controversy surrounding CBS Paramount and people's dilemma, people of conscience and their dilemma about loving their Star Trek and what are they going to do. Maybe that'll be a great future topic for this place. So thanks so much, everybody. Thank you. As always, every week, thanks for being here. Just a quick note to say I am always serious about folks. If you're interested in doing a Trekland Trek, that's something that isn't corporate. It's just me. And you will learn so much. We will pick your places with you will design it with my help, and then I will concierge lead you. TreklandTreks.com. The summer is long in SoCal, and there's plenty of time, whether you're here in town or close by for Vegas or San Diego or whatever, get in touch with me, and we'll have an awesome day of it. Love to do that. And we've got, if you go to the Facebook page, that's the Trekland Treks Facebook page, you can see photos of past Treksters who are doing the trip. Of course, who I'm really going to thank, is our Patreon folk, our TTLers. Thank you so much. The TTL Patreon Club, I should say. Thank you so much, Chuck A., James Kerwin, Diana Hopkins, Halbeard Gunn Johnson, Lawrence Todd, Chris Jiggins, Justin Weir, Andrew Dzimski, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Keith Rombach, and Comedy Forecast. Thank you, Comedy. And our live wires, one notch up from that, Jesse at Crusher Convo, Gary Williams, Rob McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Brandon Coles, this month, the newbie, Dan Leckie, Dave Gregory, Chris Garris, and Casey Shafsky. It's good to see you today, Casey. Thanks so much, everybody, for being part of that. You helped this part of Trekland zing. It's just $5 and $10. Love for everybody to be in. Patreon.com/Trekland Live. Now, we are on hiatus at the Trek Files. Boom. That means there's no new show this week and won't be for another month or so. We'll have an awesome planned premiere for season 14. Meanwhile, the other 13 are all there at thetrekfiles.com. It's our page at Memory Alpha. No time in the past has it been easier. Never before could you archive, could you scroll through and get the guests and the topics and all the episodes from 13 years of the Trek Files. I still want to thank you. In fact, we're going to be with fandom.com, the owners of Memory Alpha now for the last 20 years. If you're at San Diego, my panel is at 6 to 7. We're going to be celebrating the end of Enterprise with some actual Enterprise crew. Gary Taschel from camera, Dave Trotty, first assistant director, and Mary Kate Connolly, lead stand-in and extra. We're going to be celebrating and thinking about the end of Enterprise, the last days. Then after that, fandom.com's party at the Naughty Barrel in Gaslamp. Huge thing. I know it's a member list that's already sold out, but I'm looking forward to doing that with our podcast folks from Roddenberry who are co-sponsoring this. We're going to have especially the 7 to 10 party. The 8 to 9 hour is Star Trek. If you're headed that way and we're lucky enough to get in, I look forward to seeing you. It's still worth a look to get on the list just in case you get called up at the last minute. So San Diego, assuming I get to survive, we will be in the works and the Trek Files will be back when it's ready to be back. Otherwise, everybody, Larry Nemechek on Twitter X and Blue Sky, especially Larry's Trekland at Facebook and Instagram. And Portal 47, you heard us talking there, portal47.net. Check it out if you would. It's my best way to present deep diving. Also, I'm just going to say this right now. We have not done a Geek Nation Tours multi-day tour with my friend Terrace Cassidy. It's his company. We have not done the big multi-day Star Trek location tour. Not my day tour, but the big multi-day one that ends up at the Vegas convention next year for the 60th. We're launching that. Be listening. If you're interested, get in touch with me. It's limited to 18 people. It needs 10 to make and a limit of 18. So what a window. That will be next year, the week before Vegas in late July, early August. We're going to be talking about it in coming weeks. If that interests you, and if like specialty tours are kind of a thing you like to do and you're a Trek fan, we did 2012, 2014, and 2016. Between COVID and changing landscape of Trek, we haven't tried it again. We've tried and they've never pushed it over the line. this time we've got the anniversary, and it's just time. It's just time that we went all out and did this with a lot of celebrity guests involved too. That's going to do it for me today. Everybody, please, 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 till next week, till any live events that I do over San Diego, and I know I'll do at least one or two. So stay tuned on the YouTube and Facebook channels, would you? Meanwhile, till then, until next Tuesday when we'll be back, stay healthy, do all the things, stay woke, check your sources. Is it legit? Is it fake? It's getting thick out there. And yeah, trek well, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this bonus edition with Glen Swanson. Get the book, Inspiring Enterprise. Glen's on Facebook. It's incredible. Go support his stuff. And we will see you next week. Trek well, everybody.